Hello BookTube and welcome to Weekly Reads. This week has been quite the pain in the rear end. I had a downer 4th of July. I don't know quite what was wrong, but I was fairly blue, I guess, this past weekend. My mood picked up during the week itself, although the news this week hasn't been particularly good, particularly as far as the county is concerned. COVID-19 cases are now well north of 2,000 all total, and I think it's like 2,500 today, with I think well over 2,000 active at the moment. And McLennan County, where I live, is I think one of the hardest hit by some metric in the state. So, yeah. So hopefully, like, new measures can be put in place to kind of get this back under control. But yeah. And it rained on Tuesday quite heavily to a point where we normally get about 1.5 inches of rain in July, and we get about an inch more than what we get in the entire month. So it was quite impressive, and when it rains very hard, my apartment tends to get rainwater flooding up from the floorboards, and we've also discovered that some of the windows are leaking because they're cracked. But anyway, so hopefully it will get fixed, but since it's not going to be raining for the foreseeable future, it's probably not all that high on the landlord's to-do list. Anyway, so let's talk about books. I read all but one of the books I've set for the summer school readathon, so I'll get to that at the book I'm going to be reading tomorrow, starting tomorrow, and then however long it takes me, because it's a chunkster and I like to luxuriate, so it should take me more than a week to read. But first, let's talk about the books I have read. And I will begin with Blue Angel by Francine Prose. What can I say? So I wanted to read this book for about 20 years, since I was 16, and I read a review of it in the Waco Tribune and Herald when the Waco Tribune and Herald ran book reviews. I don't know if they still do or don't. I haven't read a physical copy of the Waco Tribune Herald in ages. So, anyway, but I read the review and I was intrigued, and I've had it in the back of my mind to eventually pick this up and read it. It took about 20 years, but here we are. And I didn't like it. It just, yeah. Well, okay, so the story's about, Professor, I think it's Ted Swinson, who's a creative writing professor at a small New England university. He's written 2 books, and he spent the last 20 years hemming and hawing about the 3rd book. He's teaching a creative writing class of students who might have ideas, might have some talent, and he gets involved with one of the students who is the most accomplished of the group, Angela, who eventually accuses him of sexual harassment. In light of harassment at a state university, the university where Swinson teaches has instituted a stricter harassment policy. And Angela accuses him, and the novel progresses from there. So, full confession, I bailed within about 50 pages. But I mean, I read ahead somewhat, so I know how it ends, but it's just, yeah. The writing is good, but I think it would have actually been more interesting if Swinson, I mean, particularly, I guess, in this day and age where knowing the power differentials, knowing what actually usually happens, that as much as this is a satire of small liberal arts colleges, of the feminist movement, of whatever, that, I mean, the truth of the matter kind of makes reading this a bit sour. And I just really didn't want to read another self-pitying novel by a writer who really should be writing and not basically whatever the hell Swenson's doing. Boo. Anyway, so yeah. Now maybe my reaction to Blue Angel was a contributing factor of my bad mood this weekend. I don't know. Anyway, so from the fiction, let's move to the other book I read for language arts. Wonderbook by Jeff Vandermeer. This is a reread. I read it about 2 years ago and quite enjoyed it. And rereading it, my estimation of this book has significantly increased. It's a soup to nuts exploration of writing, mainly for science fiction and fantasy writers. Which, when you read a typical how to write book, how to write fiction, or how to write novels and short stories, the usual focus is on realistic fiction, although usually realistic means literary, but realistic. And this one is more geared towards science fiction and fantasy. And it's fantastically done. Vandermeer breaks down the process quite nicely, and I really, really loved it. He also recommends a lot of fantastic books. In fact, I think my next reading challenge, if I feel like it, is he has let's see if I can find it. Oh yeah, here we go. Thing on style, which, if you've read or if you've watched my my last writing video, one of my main issues I think is stylistic. I want to write in a certain style, but it's coming out in a rather more minimalistic style than I want it to be. But so he has a little page here on approaches to style, and with a list of representative writers, including, like, say, Samuel Beckett, Raymond Carver, Amy Hempel, Carol Emshwiller, Octavia Butler, Karen Tybeck, Elizabeth Hand, Michael Sisko, Ursula K. Le Guin, Ben Okri, Joyce Carol Oates, China Mieville, K.J. Bishop, Angela Carter, Robert Coover, Ricky Ducournay, Jamaica Kincaid, Kenneth Lee, Catherine M. Valenti. Then I'm like, that could be interesting doing like a stylistic reading challenge based on that. And there are quite a few other recommendations in here. He also, Vandermeer also does some deep dives in his own fiction of where he had some issues and how he works through them, which I think is incredibly valuable. He also has, in the final chapters, one on revision, where he basically shows several famous writers how many drafts and how many times they had to revise their stories, like Patrick Rothfuss, who wrote The Name of the Wind. It took him 200 plus drafts or revisions before The Name of the Wind came out or was worked. See if there's anybody else famous in here. So Sophia Samatar, A Stranger in Alondria, took 11 drafts. Elliot de Bedard, her Master of the House of Darts, took 11. So yeah. So it's incredibly useful, and I think definitely if you do want to write, particularly science fiction and fantasy, this is probably the book you would want. So I also read the art and the cooking books I set myself. So let's talk about The Art of Pastel Painting by Flattmann. I really like it. I mean, he does a really good job on mark making, the basics of pastels. The demonstrations, I'm not entirely sure about. If you see my earlier art video, yeah, about that. I need a lot of practice on portraits. Definitely. Anyway, but I really do like the book. I mean, of course, one thing that I think was a bit maybe annoying, although this course, an earlier edition of this book came out in like the late 80s or early 90s, or maybe early 80s, is that there's a defense of pastel in the introduction, where up until relatively recently, pastel was one of the least popular forms of art. Generally because there wasn't much in the way of material of pastel or pastel paper. I mean, he even gives a few demonstrations on how to make pastel and how to make pastel paper. Probably the making the pastel is probably more useful now than the making of the paper, which I think there are other ways of doing it. But I mean, in the past 10, 20 years, you've had a huge flourishing of new companies making pastel compared to what there was in pastel paper. But on the whole, this is a really nice book. And particularly, I think, in how Flattmann's style is rather markedly different than a lot of pastel artists you would see on, like, say, YouTube. So, I'll show us her. I got a bruise holding that book. And I also read The New Spanish Table by Anya von Bremzen. This book is really good. Actually, revealed quite a few things about Spanish cuisine that I didn't know. Like a lot of this book is rooted in the revolution in Spanish cuisine that happened after Franco's, the longtime dictator of Spain's death in the late 70s, early 80s, somewhere around in there. Also, that eggs are a key ingredient in Spanish cuisine. It's very fascinating. So I went through the book and selected a few recipes to try. I've tried one, a Spanish fried egg, which was quite good. I'm going to try a few other recipes, and I will try to remember to report back next week or as I make them. But yeah, really, really enjoyed the book, and can't wait to try some of the recipes. Okay, so I managed to have a bit of extra time this week, so instead of starting off on These Truths, I read the April issue of National Geographic. This is the one with the flip cover of how we lost the planet and how we saved the world. So this issue is remarks on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day and looks to what the world will be like in 2070 when Earth Day becomes 100, the 100th anniversary of Earth Day. And so the issue is divided in two. There is the pessimistic side, which argues that while humanity may survive, while humanity may survive, maybe even thrive in this new reality, this new catastrophic climate change, that much will be lost. And the lead writer on this side, if I can find it, essay, had a really Elizabeth Colbert, whose essay really sort of bookends the pessimistic case of how we lost the planet. She says, to some, this may seem like a happy outcome. To my mind, it's an even scarier possibility. Oh. Okay. Maybe I should read a few more paragraphs ahead. Sorry about this. Of course, Sattel and his colleagues may be wrong, and for the same reason Downes was. Perhaps people will perfect pollen-carrying drones. They're already being tested. Perhaps we'll also figure out ways to deal with rising sea levels and fiercer storms and deeper droughts. Perhaps new genetically engineered crops will allow us to continue to feed a growing population even as the world warms. Perhaps we'll find the interconnected web of life isn't essential to human existence after all. To some, this may seem like a happy outcome. To my mind, it's an even scarier possibility. It would mean we could continue indefinitely along on our current path, altering the atmosphere, draining wetlands, emptying the oceans, and clearing the skies of life. Having freed ourselves from nature, we could find ourselves more and more alone, except perhaps if we're... So, yeah. Sorry about that, but that was just, an intense and powerful ending paragraph. And I think a lot of the further essays on that side really highlight that yeah, even if humanity does thrive even, that there's going to be a cost. And then on this side, how we saved the planet, I'm linking on her name, Emma Maris, argues that there's still a chance that we can save the world, and that it's going to take some work, but the technologies and all of that's kind of working, and also it gives a very interesting like a cross country like a trip that was very interesting, and ends with a list of young people who are leading the current sort of the fight to save the environment and to stop climate change, including like Greta Thunberg and Ghislaine Irakose, hoping I pronounced his name right, Mayumi Seto, Alexandria Villaseñor. So yeah, it's a very, very powerful issue, and yeah, so definitely if you haven't read it, yeah, really, really do read it. So what am I going to be reading starting tomorrow? I will be starting These Truths, A History of the United States by Jill Lepore. I am very, very excited to have another go at this book. And I plan on spending the next few weeks, well, probably a full week. So I'm expecting I'll probably finish it up sometime next weekend, but yeah. So I am definitely looking forward to These Truths. And I'm not going to do anything beyond These Truths because I'm not entirely sure when exactly I'll finish. So if I have a really gangbuster reading week and I manage to finish significantly early, I'll pick up a new book and I'll talk about it next week. And if I don't, then just expect at least a week of These Truths. And hopefully I can, yeah, pad it out or just enthuse for 20 or 30 minutes, depending. Again, so that was my reading week. Sorry for the breakdown, but yeah, those last paragraphs are just so powerful, and I think shows why National Geographic is one of the best magazines in the world. Yeah. So, and also before I forget, I do want to correct something. I kept saying in the summer school tag that the book by Michael Doris was The Yellow Raft in Blue Water. It's actually A Yellow Raft in Blue Water. Anyway, in case somebody catches that. But yeah, I think that's all I have for today. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. And they'll upload the art video and this video. And hope everybody hope everybody has a good weekend. And please, please, please stay safe. Thank you, BookTube.